Hello, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. We're going to start a new series. It's going to cover Konflikt 47. The name of this series is going to be Orders from the Front, and in this series, we're going to talk about the game itself, discuss the lore and background a little bit, talk about some of the upcoming releases, things like that, and even cover some of the rules. This is going to be a very broad spectrum podcast that focuses on Konflikt 47 and will probably extend a little bit into bolt action, but K47 is going to be the primary focus of it. And before I talk about it, there's some things that I'd like to discuss. This doesn't mean that my other content is going to go away. I'm still going to make firefight content. I'm still going to work towards getting new cameras so I can do battle reports and things like that. It's just a pivoting point for me. I am shifting towards a more podcast style layout. I already don't do a ton of graphics, so I think a lot of stuff I'm going to do is going to even be lighter on the graphics, maybe a little bit more. Obviously, once I start getting back into battle reports and stream games, that'll be a little bit different. But overall, that's the goal, is to be able to get this content made, get it on multiple platforms, and, I'm not going to lie, part of it is a business decision. I want to increase my reach. I will be as transparent as possible, as always. And, I want to do this without having to harangue people like, oh, please, support me on Patreon, things like that. What I want is for the ad revenue to generate enough that it keeps me going, That would make me happy. I am, semi-retired, as many of you know. So just the ability to have the ad revenue to supplement my income is more than enough. So, that being said, let's talk about Konflikt 47. This is our first episode, and let's talk about what about Konflikt 47? What is it? How did it grab my attention? Is this a new-ish game for me? All those types of things. Before we start, I just want to let everybody know I'm not an expert at this game. When I was making 40K content, I felt very comfortable in saying that I was a 40K expert. Making firefight content, I'm pretty confident in saying I'm a firefight expert. Does this mean that I'm the best? No, there's plenty of players who are probably higher skilled than me, and that's okay. But I know the rules well enough, and I've played enough games that I'm very confident in saying I know more than most people. But as we talk, I'm going to give opinions on things. We're going to talk about things, and you may disagree, and I may just be flat out wrong. As always, don't be afraid to correct me. I'm always a student. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to get better. So I'm not afraid of being corrected. The only thing I ask is that if you're going to correct me, at least show me where to find the information so I can verify. That's all, because I want to be able to know what I missed, where I missed it, things like that. I was a 40K player that I had kind of peaked. In the competitive side, I had kind of peaked. I've won multiple Best in Faction awards. I've never won a GT, but I've top 5 GTs. I've won multiple RTTs. I've done very well, winning records, and most of the things that I did. And I'm giving you this background to kind of set the stage. I played a lot of 40K. There weren't many people out there who knew more about the game than I did. But what I can say is there was a period of time where it got stale. I got bored with it. And not only that, GW has a tendency to prevent stability in their games. It reminds me a lot of how Magic used to be. I don't know if it still is, because I haven't played Magic in 5+ years. But Magic used to constantly update things to create churn effectively. You want that high turnaround. You want people constantly buying new stuff. And I see GW taking a kind of similar approach. Maybe not to the same extreme, but it's a little harder with models than it is with cards, right? The quarterly updates, coupled with the knee-jerk updates, coupled with 3-year edition changes, it just feels like the game's never allowed to breathe. And the first time I kind of felt that way was probably in 9th edition, and I had started looking at other games. It was somewhere in 9th. I didn't want to quit 40K, just needed a break. I was playing at least a game a day, and I would bet that that's an understatement. I was probably averaging about 2 games a day because of running a store, playing with local players, going out to other places for tournaments, things like that. And it was just, I just didn't care. You know, I just hit a point where I was tired of the codex creep. I was tired of a lot of things, and I just decided I needed to play something else. Hopped on my computer, started researching other games. I talked to some of the other local players, see what they got into. And unfortunately, what I found is a lot of people just play other GW games. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to get away from kind of their game mantra. You know, I've watched AOS kind of take a similar trajectory, and and again, I'm just looking at it as an outsider for some of these games. But Heresy even looks like it's starting to take that same trajectory. I spent time, like I said, talking to some of the locals. After a bunch of conversations, I had 1 or 2 friends. They were like, hey, you should look at bolt action. I don't really want to play a historical. But you should still look at it. It's a pretty solid rule system. I think you'd still have fun with it. I understand you want to do a historical, but it's still worth looking at. And I said, all right. I bought a couple boxes of infantry. I 3D printed a few tanks on my little PLA printer. And, you know, I figured if I liked the game, I'd buy some regular tanks from Warlord if I wanted. You know, it's one of those where, to me, I'm buying the infantry. I'm not too hung up on whether or not I buy the tanks. So I bought the boxes, gave it a play test. And Bolt Action was my first game where I played with the Order dice, because they have a whole series of games. They've got the Gates of Antares, Warlords of Erewhon, all these other things. I actually did a video on Warlords of Erewhon. I will do my best to remember to put a link in that. I did a review of it. Pretty good game. But yeah, this was my first jump into Order dice. And really into a full-size battle game that wasn't I go, you go. I'd played Necromunda, the newer Necromunda, where it's alternating activations. I've played, Kill Team, where even the older edition had like a kind of alternating. It was a little weird. Actually it played a lot like Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth. But everything I had played up until this point, or at least 80 to 90% of it, was structured just like Warhammer. Even if it wasn't Warhammer, it was structured like it. And I will tell you, when I first played with the Order dice, I was just kind of, They were interesting, but I needed more time with it. And I knew I needed more time with it. Anytime I play a new game, unless it is just atrocious, I always play 2 to 3 games before I make an opinion. Because I recognize you get that early, this isn't what I'm used to bias. And then the second game is still kind of feeling everything out. And then usually by the third game, I've played it enough that most of the basic concepts are clicking, and I can start to put it together and see what the game is actually all about. Now, I usually do 2 to 3 games before I give it like my full opinion. I kind of do things in stages. And that's why I'm doing the review series that I'm about to start the way I am. I do like my initial reaction, and then I have kind of this, I've played a couple games, how do I feel? And then I have this, all right, I've played 3 to 5 games, and now I just understand the rules, how do I feel? But yeah, this was a lot of fun. This all happened, at this point, we're probably talking somewhere around 6 years ago. I'm just guessing. But Bolt Action never really had a solid local scene. We didn't have a big Bolt Action community at the time. And part of that was my fault, because my store was a big driving force for our community, and I was in a small town. So, it's hard to get a lot of overlap, But like I said, we're talking about around the time, sometime in ninth. Late 8th, early ninth, I don't know. Anyway, timing isn't super important. But what was important was, I got into this bolt action. I tried a few games, and unfortunately, it just sat on my shelf. That kind of made me sad. But while it was sitting on the shelf, and I don't even remember how I came across it, I had discovered Konflikt. I think somebody had left, maybe, or I think that's exactly what it was somebody gave me the rule book, because they were like, I will never play this. You can have it. If you ever get into it, more power to you. So I flipped through it, it had a lot of the things I like. It had jump pack infantry. You have this kind of Wolfenstein, Fallout-esque power armor. You've got zombies. You've got these kind of occult-based units like werewolves and mechs and all this cool stuff. There was everything in this game that I would ever want out of a game in terms of aesthetics. And I will tell you, if you've never seen this game, this isn't a perfect comparison, but when people have never seen it, I usually just tell them this is Wolfenstein the War Game. That's the easiest way to explain it to somebody who's never seen it. Is it exact? No. But it's close enough. And the comparison isn't to detract from Konflikt or what Warlord has done for their world building. It's just a good analogy, good analogy to give players who have never seen it a feel for what it is in terms of flavor and feel. So it sat there for years. It actually burned in the fire. I don't think I ever got to play a game. And unfortunately, those years that it sat there was dedicated to a game I was just losing my love and drive for. And by the time 10th edition had rolled out, I had almost no love left for 40k. There were things about it that I didn't like in 9th. The Codex creep, I didn't like the way they had given armies like free victory points just for showing up to kind of balance them. There was an Arcs of Omen detachment that I didn't like. And I know that's a point of contention for players. Force organization charts are a point of contention for players. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent for those of you new to my channel. I legitimately suffer from pretty crippling ADD, ADHD, whatever you want to call it. So we go off on tangents a lot, and I will do my best to keep this short. And I just lost what we were about to say. That'll happen. Again, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the channel. But yeah, so we're going to just jump back a little bit. I discovered blah, 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 rule book, 10th edition, 40k rolled out. I was losing my love for, the Arcs of Omen. I knew I would get there eventually. So the Arcs of Omen Force Organization. If something is being pitched as a war game, it has to have a Force Organization. It has to. If you're going to tell me 40k is a war game, which I'm going to tell you it's not, and that's okay. That's not me putting down 40k. That's me telling you 40k is a tabletop strategy game. It is not a war game. But if you're going to pitch it as a war game, it has to have a force organization chart. Armies should feel like armies. And I brought this up because, again, I know it's a point of contention coming up in Kings of War. Because Kings of War had very, very fluid and free list construction. And my understanding, and I haven't looked at it yet, but my understanding is the new edition has a bit more restrictive list construction. I play 2 to 3 games of Kings of War every few months. Like, that's it. I don't play a ton, so I don't care. They can do whatever they want. But when 40k kind of went to this free-for-all list construction, that was a big turnoff for me. For a lot of reasons. We had 40 years of a force organization chart. And I know players would cry, boo-hoo, I gotta play a troop tax just so I could play the units I want. I don't fucking care, man. You don't like it, don't play the game. You know? That was always kind of my perspective. You know, if you don't like the fact that you have to bring 3 squads of troops in order to bring all your other bullshit, don't play the game. It gets that simple. So when 40K went to a free-for-all, and I didn't like not having a force organization, I voiced my concerns. I said, I think this is going to create huge balance issues, and it sure as hell did. But then I stopped playing the game. I put my money where my mouth was. I stopped playing. I haven't played 40K in over a year. I've played maybe 6 games in the last year because there was a brief period where I dipped back in just to see how much I would like it, and I still don't like it in its current state. But force organization to me is very important. Whether you like it or not, it's important for a war game. Now, again, if we're a tabletop strategy, which is what I would tell you 40K is, that's fine. They can do whatever they want. Sorry for the tangent. But yeah, I at this point, 10th came out. That change I didn't like. I didn't like the overall simplicity of it. The mandatory squad sizes, the free war gear, because it took some of the nuance out of the game. So the game was just getting very bad, in my opinion. If you like 40K, more power to you. I will never tell you to stop playing a game you love. You know, if you love it, keep playing it. It's just not for me. And, you know, as 10th came out, I had already started dabbling with other games. I mentioned Bolt Action. I even checked out Age of Sigmar, Fallout, Wasteland Warfare. I'd kind of like bounced around, but unfortunately it was mostly just skirmish games, and that's not what I want. I want a war game. I want armies. I want dudes killing dudes, right? That's what we're here for. And when I took my hiatus, we're at about 13 months. That's when I first got into Firefight. This whole time, Konflikt has been in the back of my head. This is a game that I have been just like fucking forever. I have been looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. But I picked up Firefight. It's quick, clean rules, breath of fresh air. I absolutely love it. And it does everything that Mantic wants it to do. It really does. And I'm going to keep playing it. But it isn't exactly what I wanted. You know, the models they're hit and miss. You know, Firefight, the newer models have definitely stepped up their quality. The new Firefight models are very good. There's some background, but it's a relatively new-ish game. But in-game, I would say that some army, like the armies, they don't have a very strong flavor. You know, and again, I come from a very strong 40K background where orcs and space marines feel very different. And Firefight is kind of getting to that point where the armies feel different, but again, it's a pretty young game. And there's a lot of sameness to it, just because of how the game is set up. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a fantastic game. But, you know, I just felt like something had been missing. And I had noticed that Warlord announced it would finally be updating the Konflikt 47 rule. And like I said, I've been watching this game. I love this game. I love the models. I love the Weird War II aesthetic. I like the background of it. You know, they showed the new sculpts. I love the new Fireflies. I thought they were just amazing. And for those that don't know, I'm a prior service. I served with the 101st Infantry Regiment in the U.S. Army. So when I played Bolt Action, I was U.S. And when I was looking at Firefight, I was like, oh, I'm just going to... Or not Firefight, Konflikt. I just thought, man, it's a natural progression for me to straight into the U.S. And I've the whole time, I've been like, do I get a box? Do I not get a box? I'll never get to play it. But some of these models are super cool. Some of them, again, some of them are old. They need updated. But I work part-time with Litco. For those that don't know, you can go to litco.net, see what they do. We make a lot of game components like movement trays and stuff. Nice little semi-self-promotion there. But we had one of the, I forget what they're called. They're Pathfinders in Mantic. But it's a guy who kind of goes out, runs events, or does demos. I don't know what they're called in Warlord. But we had a guy come out. He gave a Konflikt 47 demo. And the graphic designer and myself played through it. I already kind of knew what to expect because I'd read the rulebook for 2nd edition multiple times. And I'd at least played a couple games of Bolt Action and some Warlords of Erewhon. So while I don't know everything there is to know about Konflikt, I at least have general concepts of how things worked. Our graphic designer never played a tabletop game in his life outside of a few I'd brought in to show people. And he loved it. He loves the aesthetic, he loves the power armor, the setting, just absolutely loves it. So, seeing him excited about it, I was like, okay, I'm just going to buy the 2-player starter set. I'm going to buy it, and then he can just have half. I don't care. As long as I have somebody to play with, I don't give a shit. But I was like, all right, I'm going to have, because he had wanted the Axis initially. And then he started kind of looking through the units and the models and stuff on the website, and he had decided, I actually want the US. And I'm not going to lie. That was kind of a gut punch, I was just like, oh, man. But I thought, you know what? That's okay. Because for me, having the ability to play with somebody is more important than playing the army I want. And I had to find things about Axis to justify that in my head. Because I thought, if Stalltroopen and the Spider Mech, I forget what it's called, the Volt Spinner, but if Stalltroopen were kind of the, if this is the standard, if this is what the Axis runs, and it's a lot of slow, slow shooting-centric units, I'm probably going to sell these and find something else, because this isn't me. Again, if you don't know, I come from a Drukhari background in 40k and Orcs, and in Firefight, I've played a little bit of everything. I'm still trying to find my home in that game. I find things that I like, but I just kind of, I don't know. We'll get into that at a later time. But I discovered the Schreckwolfen and the, and if my pronunciation sucks, I apologize. If you're German and you're hearing this, and you're just like, oh my god, yeah, this Yankee is so terrible, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for that. That was also probably terrible, but I'm doing my best here. The Schreckwolfen and then the Nachtjäger, both of those stood out to me as like, oh, these are just really cool. And even though I don't necessarily like the old Warlord sculpts for them, they may get new sculpts. And even if they don't, I can find alternate companies. GW makes Vargeists or Vargulfs. I forget what they're called. They're very similar in what they are. And they are beautiful models. So if Warlord makes new Nachtjäger, I'll buy those. But I'm still going to buy the GW ones for now. And then, as chance would have it, I found out that about 2 other players play locally. They are currently building into Konflikt 47. And then a local university had reached out to myself and another guy to come organize an open to the community game night. And I thought, well, this is awesome. I could build like a little firefight and Konflikt community there. I'll take both games, see which one gets more traction, because I have a firefight community, and we do events, we do things, I can build that. But if I can also kind of work on a Konflikt community, I could have it both ways. I could have my cake and eat it too. So like I said, I got the starter box. I got it from Michigan Toy Soldier, and it came a week early. And as I said, Amir, he grabbed the US box. I got the Axis, but I got them all built. I got them primed. The Stalltrooper are actually painted. But I don't have them based yet. I still got to do the little spider bot. But this was the first time I was actually excited to paint something. I'm not a painter. I don't like painting. I'm not a paint guy. I'm a dice guy. I want to roll dice. This is why I play these games, to roll dice. So for me to look at the Stahltruppen, and even though it's a very basic and simple paint job, I was excited to paint them because I thought, man, these just remind me, and again, I'm not saying Warlord ripped anybody off, but they remind me of the Wolfenstein power armor. Or maybe the Wolfenstein power armor reminds me, well, I guess Wolfenstein was around before the Stahltruppen. But that's what they remind me of, so I just kind of pulled up a picture of the Wolfenstein power armor, and that was my inspiration. And I'm really happy with how they turned out. I have no complaints. So that's kind of how I got into Konflikt. That's how we got from one of the best Drukhari players in the world to a guy who likes to go around and play Firefight to now, hey, this game that I've been just eyeballing forever, I'm finally taking the plunge. And for those that don't know, we're going to talk a little bit about the background of Konflikt. And I'm going to do my best to be as accurate as possible. Bear with me. Got the early 1940s. World is burning. War is hell. Armies clash across continents. And the war-torn scars of a devastated landscape. It's brutal. In 1943, the Manhattan Project sets out to accomplish the impossible. Create a weapon so destructive that it would just force other countries, other armies into submission. Peace through violence. And then at Los Alamos, scientists detonate the first nuclear bomb. And this test gave them so much more than just data. It actually tore open a rift that released all these wild energies into the world. And then in 1944, a nuclear strike on Dresden would give them the same results. So we have these two rifts. One in Los Alamos, one in Dresden. You have the Axis in control of that. And then obviously Los Alamos, the U.S. is in control of. You've got these nations that are scrambling to understand this new force. They call it Rift Tech. And they basically just, as humans do, find a way to weaponize it. Use its influence to create twisted beasts of war, horrific technologies, and, just titans of battle, like these mechs. We're going to talk briefly about the factions. It's not going to be super deep. We're not going to talk about playstyle, just a little brief background. I know when this edition came out, people were kind of upset, some of them, about the exclusion of Nazis. As a person who is brand new to Konflikt 47, in terms of a player, not new to the setting, not new to the game, but just new as a player, I don't care. I would actually prefer it to not have Nazis. Not because, I'm scared to have Nazis on the table, but, it's a sci-fi. And it makes more sense to me that some of these Axis powers effectively just kind of collapse in on themselves and something else comes out. So, the Nazi regime collapsed under the weight of its own occult ambitions. It finds, the Green Vault, which is a secret cabal of sorcerers, scientists, and visionaries. They take their newfound power, they raise dead, they create these suits of heavy armor, all this other stuff. This makes sense to me. It's not necessarily that the Nazis are gone. It's that they are not Nazis in name. And it'd be more like if you're a Marvel fan, right? And I don't know that much about Captain America, so I'm speaking outside. I'm a big Punisher fan, big Spider-Man fan. Speaking on Captain America is way outside any level of my knowledge zone. So if this did happen, feel free to correct me in the comments. But it'd be like if basically Hydra just like if they just took over Germany. And maybe, like I said, maybe that happened. but I don't know enough about it. What I see, because I've just watched Captain America movies, I've never read the comics. So what I see is like Hydra is to Germany as Shield is to the U.S. So it'd be more like if Hydra just became Germany rather than the Nazi regime continuing. And that actually makes sense in a world like this, where you have those that are closest to the rift being able to harness its power and take control. And it may not cause a big shift in paradigms. Like, they might still just be shitty people. But it does make sense that would happen. Then you have the United States, and they use their Rift Tech for jump pack infantry. They do have power armor, but they don't have heavy power armor the way that Germany does or Axis do right now. That, again, may change. I'd like to hope it doesn't. What I don't want to see is everybody just all get the same stuff. And there is some kind of unit uniqueness throughout the armies. But there's also a lot of overlap, which also makes sense, because you're going to steal technology from each other. You're going to share technology with allies, stuff like that. So that kind of overlap makes sense, but then also having unique stuff makes sense too. So, they've got the jump pack infantry, power armor, their mechs, so they don't have like the Walker mechs. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do the USS, because some of those mechs are so cool. Again, I can't name them all off the top of my head, but some of them visually really cool. I did tell Amir I would build his, that's our graphic designer, I did tell him I'd build his linebacker for him because he's never really built much in the way of models. That model is ugly. I'm going to say it right now. And I don't think the model's ugly. I think the way it's posed is ugly. So I'm going to see if I can kind of dynamically pose that for him when I build it. Because hate painting, love building. They also are the ones behind the destructive power of Tesla weaponry, and so far, and I've only gotten to play a couple of games, but so far my understanding is, and I'm not talking from lore, I'm talking mechanics now. Tesla weapons, they're one of the things that seem another hot button topic. I think they're awesome, but again, I haven't played a ton of games, but I think they're a lot of fun, and that's what I care about. I'm here for the memes. You get the Rift dice, which we'll do a whole episode on that type of stuff. But the easiest way to describe Rift dice to people, if you've never played Konflikt, is most of your units get a Rift die, and that's almost like a pool of command points, which 40k players will know what that is. But those are unit specific, and then when you spend them, they do replenish. We're not going to get into that, but you can spend them to activate that unit's special ability, and then once they're exhausted, they lose a certain ability until they replenish their rift. It's basically like you overcharge your reactor, it overheats a little bit, and then you got to wait for it to cool down for your ability to work again. That's a good way of comping it. So the Tesla weapons, like the, what is it? One of the mechs has a Tesla cannon option. You spend the Rift die, and you get to roll 4 dice, I think it is, and every hit you get actually adds to the penetrating, and it's awesome. It's so much fun. Like, I can just surge my thing, I can like super overcharge it, roll 8 dice, and then every hit just adds to the pen value. So it's one of those where I understand when people are like, these are poopy, because like, yeah, they probably are. But I'm still going to play them. I think they're fun, and I can bet you that if I have enough time with this game, I can get pretty good at it. There's not many things I'm good at in life, but dice games, that's one of the few things on that list. Then you have the Commonwealth. They're high-tech, adaptable, oh my god, adaptable faction. They've got kind of a classic British look. Like they have these little, they're like drones, and they have the, I forget what the helmets are, but they got the little saucer around the heads. They have a specific name, can't think of it right now. Let me know in the comments if you know what it is. But, Brits were one of the armies I did consider. And they've got, and they're both, I think they both have like super soldiers. United States and the British, I believe, also have super soldiers. Kind of like a Captain America unit. And then the Soviets, you've got, and this is one I haven't seen a ton of, but they do have things like werebears and things like that, so that's kind of cool. And then the Empire of Japan, you've got a cunning and fanatical technologically diverse faction that uses a mix of Axis-derived and unique Rift tech to gain an advantage. So they have a lot of different things, Japan does, and that's kind of cool. The main thing to know is that this is Weird War, and this is still a World War II game. So this isn't going to be like 40K. Well, it's probably a bad example. But, what I mean by that is most of the things in this game have one hit point. They get shot, they get hit, they get wounded, they die. Like, that's it. So cover is going to be very important. Positioning is going to be very important. Ranges are pretty high for some things, so keep that in mind. Not for everything. I think, like, standard rifles are like 24 inches. But like your tanks and stuff, gonna have very long range. Machine guns gonna have very long range. So just these are things to keep in mind. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Konflikt. It kind of hits me in a weird way. The rules are pretty clean, they're nicely written, but this is one of the few games where the background draws me in. This is a world that I want to run a campaign in, not just a game I want to play tournaments with. There aren't a lot of war games where the setting pulls me in. Again, I'm a dice guy. I just want to roll dice. So it's not often where the setting is like, man, I dig this, I love this. Because like I said, it kind of has that Fallout, Wolfenstein vibe, and those are both games that I love. And so it just kind of pulls me in. This is a lived-in, breathed-in world with its own history. And it feels fleshed out, it feels good. And it's interesting, and it holds my attention. The models I love, especially the new sculpts. Some of the old sculpts I like, some of them I could do without. Like I said, there's going to be some that I do some alternate models for until they get new sculpts, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, it just, there isn't a thing about this game that I don't like. There are things about it that could probably be improved. I'm not saying that. Melee is it's interesting in this game. And we'll touch on that later. We're not going to do it now. But Melee is very interesting in this game, and that could probably be improved upon. But it does what it's supposed to do. And that's what's important. Everything in this game is functional, and it feels like it has intent. It doesn't feel like rules are just kind of tacked on for the sake of tacking a rule on. So, I would encourage you all to take a look at it. Give it a try, even if you just proxy some stuff. Definitely give it a try. It's a fantastic game. If you're a bolt action player, definitely give it a look. Because your bolt action models will work with it. I know again, you got the internet trolls up there crying because boo-hoo, my bolt action models don't get special rules. Who cares? Use them or don't. Like, I don't see that as an issue. But again, I didn't play these games beforehand. So I do understand that the change could be upsetting. But at the end of the day, when you could just play guys in power armor, why are you bringing guys without it, And I don't know what the points differences are. I'd have to look at it. But I can't imagine it's one of those, like, if you're doing it for flavor, then the rules shouldn't matter. And if you're bringing them to a tournament, you're not bringing them because they interact with your army rules anyway. You're probably bringing them for cheap units to sit on objectives and go do things and screen. So at the end of the day, it's like, all right, so who cares? Just treat them for what they are if you're going to use them. Understand that they're just chaff units for whatever. That doesn't mean that they had to be, because you had like the bazooka teams and stuff like that, and I get it. But at the end of the day, man, who cares? Just play the game, have fun. That being said, our next episode, we're going to talk about the Rift. We're going to talk about Rift technology. We're going to talk about Rift rules. We're going to dive into that. And then, we're going to keep this going. This will probably be every 2 weeks. I'm going to try to get an episode up every 2 weeks, because I'm going to alternate between this and Firefight. I've been really working to get my groove, find my rhythm, get everything going. I've been really working to overcome, like I'm not joking when I tell you it's crippling ADHD. The Adderall helps a lot, but it's pretty tough to work around some days. So we're really pushing, trying to get stuff out. And by we, I mean me. That's the royal we. But I do want to thank everybody for listening and spending your time with me. That means a lot to me. You could be doing it anywhere else, and you chose to do it with me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.